Hi, I'm Jerica.
I'm Embers.
I'm Aki Grimes, or Air if you prefer.
And I'm El Ninja Cupcake, your DM. And this is Insight Check, where we delve into the dungeon of your bad decisions to retrieve the treasure of wisdom.
Yes.
Oh, it's like
Welcome, one and all.
Hello.
Wisdom is so much better than wisdom. Definitely.
It's like 3 or 4 eyes better, at least.
So, sometimes we answer questions, but usually first we do a dungeon crawl.
Yeah.
Tell me, friends, in this most recent week of weeks, in the land of D&D and tabletop games, where have you been?
Dungeon crawl. Da-na-na-na-na-na, dungeon crawl. So I have a crawl of dungeons, and
I have a doll of Crungeons.
and I like Dolph Lundgren. So here's my dungeon crawl, Calmer Maybe. It's May, and one of the art prompts in the Twitter universe, which intersects with the D&D Twitter universe, is the mermaid art prompt. So what I do when I should be sleeping or working or spending time with friends is often I'm scrolling through Twitter art, and the mermaid stuff is really good. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to highlight just maybe my top 10 list as quick as I can, as quick as my little mouth will take me through my top 10 faves.
If you say it really fast, Jay can slow it down for us in post.
You'll have that option. Or I could talk at normal speed.
Speed at lower pitch and sound just as bad.
But I kind of want to highlight a couple that I thought were amazing.
Don't you mean immersing?
Much like mer people in the sea, we are immersed. Please go on.
So
They're not fishing around.
God, the puns, we're just diving deep for these ones, folks.
We'll scale it back a little.
Cupcake, you brought it around.
all right, so in no particular order, my top 10 so far, and we've been through about the first 75% of the month, so I might miss some amazing stuff at the back end. But number 1, the adorable merman with seals from
Oh my
Orson.
god. Yes.
See, you've seen it. It's swum its way into your
Not
heart.
only have I seen it, I adore it.
I was like, I have lived it.
I have been that merman.
I was the left seal.
I've been in the shape of that water, yeah.
What?
Especially the tail. He's got a very unique take on the tail. It's got a little bit of a kind of Lovecraftian but cute vibe going to it. It's great. Yeah.
It's a softer Lovecraft. It's a Lovecraft for the kids.
Cute Thulu.
Next up, the incredible goth goldfish from user Imagine Amanda. We'll link all of these, but I have never seen a more goth goldfish than I saw today.
I mean, it's such a heated race.
It's the intersection of all my interests, and it's awesome.
It sounds the best.
I don't know how my Twitter has missed all of this.
I don't know how my Twitter has given me so much of it, but I'm going to roll with it.
Oh.
It's okay.
Please.
So there is a really strong series of pieces from Carolyn Gariba, and the Resting Mermaid pose is my favorite. It is extremely atmospheric and very good use of just line work and shading and inking. I loved it. There is a very unique tiny little unicorn sketch, great pencil rendering from ASIN 745. It's almost like if you crossed a powerful steed with a little seahorse. Very, very cool. And a very excellent pose. John Bliss at John Bliss Art also has a great series where he effectively kind of made almost like a cartoonized series of PCs and hero designs like you or I might play if we were doing an underwater environment in D&D, but lots of different fish inspirations or fispirations, be it finned or squid or shellfish. It's really good. Another person who had an incredible series, sort of based on the work of the Japanese anime artist Amano, was an artist named Kikai Kotaki. And there's an Ursula reminiscent mer warrior sketch, which I thought was kind of like the for me, the most awesome Amano Vampire Hunter D reminiscent merman that I saw. Andrew Marr also, or at Andrew K. Marr, also an amazing artist with a big following. He has this sort of colossal merman spawn piece, and it is really freaking cool from a kind of great old ones from great depths kind of vibe. So I thought that was a unique take on the prompt. Then you have, you've got a dramatic pose and composition of kind of dragons and flowers from user Ash Samuels. A really intense palette, really, really cool pose, lots of really cool detail. 2 more to go. There is a user called Eighth0 who has a really, really cool white on black composition, and there's a great script to it. It's not a digital art. It's like their sketchbook they opened up. It's black paper and white ink. Very, very cool look. And last but certainly not least, Samir Barrett, or at Sketchmaster Skills without any vowels. He did an awesome series of Mer-May-prompted mech warriors, which...
What?
Yeah. It's badass.
That's a lot of M's.
It's M intensive. So those are my top 10. No order. From mechs to goth goldfish to merman with seals.
I have a dungeon crawl today.
Hit me
I
up.
have purchased for myself a copy of Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes. And this is available digitally through D&D Beyond, and it's also available at your local game store, which is where I got mine. In the spirit of lists of things, I would like to talk about my 3 favorite stat blocks from Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes. The first one is actually 5. So on page 234, 235, 236, 237, and that's it. There is a whole thing about Starspawn.
Whoa.
And I had never heard of Starspawn before. They sound like great old one derived entities with maybe a little less power, but a lot of charm. And they're all, I believe, they're all evil, but some are neutral evil, chaotic evil. Yeah, those are the options. But I think they're really cool. They range from challenge rating 1/4 all the way up to challenge rating 16.
Whoa.
So yeah, there's a lot happening here. They lie beyond the material plane. So they're like way out there. And they remind me a lot of some stuff going on with the C team. Not as much as like if you cracked like Princes of the Apocalypse, but like I could see some of these guys showing up, when the Tentacular Spectacular goes wrong or something like that. Yeah, so that is the thing. So we have Starspawn Gru, Starspawn Hulk, Starspawn Larva Mage, Starspawn Mangler, and Starspawn Seer.
Which was the highest challenge rating, out of curiosity?
That is Starspawn Larva Mage, and that is also the one you get the picture of.
So what else is in Morty Cordy's for everyone else out there?
Everything. So like in a way that's cataloged, there is a bit about the Blood War. There is a chapter about elves, dwarves and the Dwarger, Gith and their endless war, halflings and gnomes, and then just a whole bunch of stat blocks from other things. But they do, in the stat block section, they'll sometimes give like more meat.
Gotcha. So is it a lot of extra lore?
Oh, yes.
Okay. I have not been able to pick up a copy as of yet, but it is on my to-do list.
It is dripping in lore.
So in general, have you found this to be a very lore-intensive addition to the arsenal?
Yes. And I think, like, it's great. It's cool.
I like it.
I'm going to ignore most of it. But like things like, so for example, I thought that the Githyanki and the Githzerai were on the same team. Nope.
Oh, no.
They're on different teams. So that's clear now to me. I've been disillusioned of my previous illusions, but let me continue with my last two favorite stat blocks. Adult Oblex, page 218. This is an ooze that can manifest a humanoid shape.
Ooh.
Think about that one for a little bit.
I'd rather not.
Think
Let
about
that-
honeypots.
Let that
Think
marinate
about
in your brain.
bees. And the last
Gumby
one.
monster.
The last one that I really like, and it's actually in a group of 4. There is a water, a fire, an air, and an earth. I wouldn't say version, but a set of these. And this one is called Elder Tempest. It's a challenge rating 23, and it is a storm manifest. And it looks like a dragon with like a whole bunch of wings on it, but also a cloud and a storm.
How cool.
It's really cool. Neutral. It's an elemental. And I think Banna has a new reason for existing. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, I think she needs a friend.
Yeah.
Oh, this is the one also that brings our dear friend Haley's Eladrin to life, right?
Yes, so there is a Autumn Eladrin in the elf section, but there's stat blocks for Eladrin, and you get all the other 3 as well in beautiful living color. And I'm stroking
so
it right
exciting.
now. They're so pretty. So yeah, so go ahead and pick up your copy of Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes if you so desire. I highly recommend it.
Our dear sweet DMJ bought Morty Cordy's Foamy Toes on D&D Beyond and shared it with us via campaign. And I found this creature, and I can't remember the name of it, but it's a mountain-sized rock turtle. It's gargantuan. It kind of looks like the turtle from Pandaria Cupcake. But,
That's where my brain went.
yeah, but it's even more like elemental and stony and made of rock. And it doesn't really have a face. It's just kind of a maw, but he's looking up, just kind of eating some rocks with trees growing off the back of him. And I told Jay that I don't care what it requires. I want this turtle in our game.
His name is Zaratan.
Zaratan, that was it. I was trying to remember.
Do you wanna guess its challenge rating?
Like a gajillion. Or maybe, I don't know.
I'm going 26.
22.
22, yeah. But why would you ever want to fight him? He's such a good boy.
Bring him plenty
True.
of cedars and you guys will be best friends.
Yeah,
He's got little
exactly.
trees growing on him. It's pretty sweet.
Yeah, I just wanna pet him and tell him he's a good guy.
I also want to, while you were here, so the wizards at D&D are cooking up a great stream called the Stream of Many Eyes, or as I like to call it, some D&D. Just some D&D. It's fine, whatever. And it is in June, early June, and you should look forward to that. The streams will be available on the D&D Twitch, and you can also buy tickets if you are so interested to hang out with all the amazing people and streamers and personalities of the D&Ds.
Indeed, it's a successor to the Stream of Annihilation, and so it's like, much as they mentioned and released and showed off the Tomb of Annihilation storyline, this is going to be the prelude to the next major story arc, next major campaign they're putting out. So I'm excited to see. And yeah, everyone from every major D&D stream is there. It looks pretty awesome. And I think that's it. And I think we're done, right?
Okay, bye!
We done got crawled.
Thank you for joining this episode of Insight Check.
No.
No, but for real, sometimes we answer questions.
What makes a DM a great DM? And so we got a series of different questions and comments about this, one of which I wanted to jump into, which is from our good friend John Bennett at Coffee Robot. And he said he wanted to know a little bit about what are some cool hooks and features that I guess he's assuming we're great DMs, have given or thought of for towns and locations in your campaigns. In one of our previous episodes, Jay said that he tries to make every town stand out by having one key feature, one thing that is meant to kind of draw the interest of the party and make the place interesting. So what are some examples that we can think of that we've seen or that we've used before to try to make locations interesting to the party, make them unique in some way?
Well, let me before we get into this, just throw this out there that your DMJ is also now streaming some of these world creation things on Twitch, and I sat down one day and watched him build out a town in his Shambhala Land, and it was pretty awesome.
I too have watched some of Jay's streams. I try to catch them live, but he's just always on there, so I can't always. But I have watched some of the VODs. I've caught a few of them live, and yeah, it is really interesting to watch his thought process. I was watching him design an encounter, and he was creating a battle map with a pixel art tool for his Friday game, where it looked like a kind of a desert-based. They were fighting amongst sand dunes kind of thing. So yeah, that's a great resource for if anyone wants to see what it means to be a DM in process.
Yeah, and you can see the way that he uses some of the... Okay, so I'm definitely not a computer person, but from my little feeble eyeballs watching him, you have like all the coding and things, and the way that he works it all and has it come to fruition. It's the next level. So if you need help with any of this, go watch Jay.
One thing I would suggest if you're trying to drum up ways to make specific locales or whatnot interesting. This was something I used in our Dungeon World campaign that just came to an end last night, was try to find places in the world that you think are really cool. So I had Jay's cleric was a priest of an earth goddess sort of thing, and Jaraika's druid was a character who happened to be the realization of a prophecy of that faith. So I needed a temple that would make sense for this kind of earth-based divinity, this earth religion. So I thought of Petra in Jordan, which is a temple that's built right into the side of a rock face. If you've ever seen Last Crusade, Indiana Jones, that's the temple that they end up in. They used Petra as the face of it. So I thought having a mountain in the middle of a town with basically this entire temple carved right into the core of it would be a good kind of cool way to do an earth-based, place of faith. And so that was my main hook for this town that they had gone into.
Cool. When I started out doing environment design and town design for campaigns, I was very much fixated on the idea of there being kind of a novel hook, or the hook being somehow... I felt the burden to make the hook or the special aspect of that town or city, make it novel, make it different. I think that one of the things that I've learned that's allowed me to be more effective in designing locations, towns, and cities is to assume that all of the hooks and all of the clever ideas and features have already been done probably a couple hundred times each. Worry less about that and worry more about how the one or two features, and for me personally, I don't think you need more than that. You certainly can. And if you want to get really baroque with your design of a town or a city, it's that much more flavor for your group if they enjoy that. But for me, it's always one or two things that serve the characters I think the characters would react to, or that I think will serve the narrative. And I also pull as much as I can from real life or history. Like where I grew up, there was a small town near where I lived, and at the edge of that town there was a park, and the park was in the 40s and 50s, vibrant. There were lots of games, and there was a roller coaster, and there was a pool, but it went completely deserted during the civil rights era because there were fights over segregation of whites-only swimming pools and stuff like that. And there were a couple of incidents where police were called, and eventually people just stopped going. And so when I visited there, it was totally run down and dilapidated. And something like that, even though it's not what I initially set out to build for like a dramatic immersive experience, something that has that flavor or that history or that aftertaste to it, or like it has the ghosts of something in it, even if I have nothing else about the town or the city, that's what I usually try to find as a hook.
That's kind of the I think the quintessential fantasy world is always there is some ghost of a previous society sitting just below the surface of this world, and that's where the adventure always is. It's in the lost ruins of a bygone era that are beneath your feet.
Yeah. And so at first when I was very early in making an environment, I'd be like, oh, that's so cliche or hokey or obvious. But I found that that's irrelevant to me now. What's relevant is, as obvious as it could be, is it going to be is it going to be the right flavor of motivation for the group of the story?
And that's precisely it. Like, when I was trying to create this thing, I was like, well, obviously I'm basing it on something real, so it has literally been done before. And so I tend to think, yeah, I want to pick something that makes that's an obvious fit because everything's been done. I say that, and then I go into Jiraika's game, where it's a series of islands that are connected together by threads of fungi that, when pulled together, become an entire like teleportation device. And I was like, okay, that's new. No one's done that one before. I was like, Jiraika, please, I think your insight on this would be critical because, that was one of the most original locales I'd ever seen.
Yeah, how the hell did that come about?
So for me, thinking through the T-Team sort of landing place, it was a journey. So it didn't start out like what it ended up like, but I thought about it in terms of inhabitants. I wanted this and this and this as far as groups of things you could encounter. So the first thing that you meet is a group of Kenku, and they're like a murder, if you will. They're like a family.
Yes.
And so I was like, okay, so it would make sense that they're there. I started with the floating island. I'm like, okay, floating islands are, they're really cool. I like that idea. There's a lot of literature that talks about islands being separate and you travel from one to the other to the other. I really like that sort of trope in a story. I was like, okay, so it makes sense for bird people to exist here. So that's like one sort of entity. What other kinds of entities can live here and why would they be here? So then I was like, okay, it would be really interesting to have as a juxtaposition to the big mass of like a group of things to have a single thing. So I was like, okay, we'll put a lone Aasimar here that is actually like a protector of this like ruin of this palace that the Aasimar built that kind of alludes to like what this place was before, and that got all into like the Citadel of 1,000 years. Okay, what is this Citadel's story? The story of the Citadel is that it was built to last 1,000 years, and it got to 996, and then it shattered.
Oh gosh.
So that's that. And so I'm like, okay, what else can we meet on floating islands that can sort of sustain themselves, that the characters can interact with? Okay, so mushroom people can live in the earth, and these earth moats are made of earth. So wouldn't it be cool if on the
Maiko did.
Yes. And so on the underside of these earth moats, there's a whole like colony of myconids, and they had this idea, and they were helped by the wizard that you meet, to try to reassemble the islands. And so I was like, okay, well, mushroom mycelium are pretty strong, or we could pretend they are, so like they could be using that to do that. And that also gave a place for the wizard to be. So like this is a lot of stuff, but in the course of going through this like starting area, you're supposed to meet all the members of this group, and so they were kind of like assigned these different things. So the wizard was meant to be with the myconids as kind of a member of the group and the people that they were interacting with. So it was wizard and myconids. It was the sorcerer lady that left and the Kenku. It was the Aasimar and this kind of empty citadel that has a lot of drawings of people, but no people. And then the last one is the
inventor with the modrons.
Inventor, right? So then she had all of her modrons, and they had been blown into this area from the rift that's nearby, which is why they didn't have any wings. Because they, in the storm that buffeted them onto the islands, they lost their wings.
Saddest modrons.
So it was a sort of a thought that all of these four characters that you're going to learn about had like a group associated with them. And then, okay, so what group could exist on this like desolate floating rock outcropping.
I like that. That's a really interesting design place. Like, start not from the setting, but from the people, and reverse engineer the setting from the inhabitants. Very cool.
Now, I have to make a confession. I'm a human.
No!
I know.
You take it back.
It's shocking. I know. I do have, all the human things.
Carbon-based.
But because of this, I look for pattern, and I find meaning in pattern. And I always think it's really interesting what DMs choose to use multiple times or repeat or bring up again. So, like, for example, and this might just be because of the character I'm playing, but whenever Jay mentions a moonwell, I'm like, oh, did you say moonwell? So, like, I'm always really interested in, like, what's coming back again and again and again. And the way that DMs choose to be intentional with that, I think is really, really interesting.
Your elite motifs are neat motifs.
Yes.
Well, that is awesome. Thank you for sharing that insight. It's good to know, like, where that came from, because I was like, this is very, like, my character
it's a little
was kind
out
of,
there.
Yeah.
I was like, Jerica was on some shit.
No, let me tell you,
Maybe
can I
mushrooms.
tell you a little bit? I know I'm talking a lot, but can I tell you a little bit about
That's
a previous...
that's literally our job.
I
It's
know.
okay.
Hi, I'm on a podcast. So can I tell you about a previous incarnation that I was thinking about?
Ooh, yes.
So I was actually thinking about tribes on each different island, and it was kind of like their, like, spa area.
Oh man.
So, like, there was, like, a tabaxi, like, jacuzzi action going on, and there was, like, a turtle, like, conclave thing.
I thought you were going to say
so it was,
turtle portal.
yeah.
Oh, God.
So it was very much, like, I wanted to take the races from, is it Volos?
Yeah.
From Volos and be like, ooh, I want an island of each of these. So, like, there was, like, a Triton pool. So, like, that was, like, the less sort of connected version. And then I was like, okay, so what are they actually doing here? They're here to meet these individuals from this team. Let's see if we can step it back and make that, like, a focus of, the area.
And while it was great, can I say I am a little bit sad that I didn't get to go to, like, Tabaxi has spa if you have coin. Like,
it's
I
better
would have loved
in your
all
mind.
of this.
It's way better in your head. Just stay with that. That's how the best fantasies are born. Just roll with it. It's fine.
This is like the olive bar of D&D adventures.
Yep.
This is awesome.
So I think we've answered that question pretty well about how you can create some interesting and dynamic and cool locales as a DM. This next question comes to us from our friend Matt Will Jackson of the Saddle Council. It talks about players, but it also talks about DMs as well. How does a player share backstory stuff in-game in a way that isn't just an info dump? Or, moreover, how can a DM coax or set this up for their players? And I think this is a really good question because oftentimes role-playing, it is acting at the end of the day, and it is a muscle that needs to be flexed, because I know I've been in games where it's like, well, I had to leave the monastery that I came from because I committed a cardinal sin. Like, every PC, as soon as they meet in the inn, has revealed every single element. It's like, you're the guy at the bar that won't shut up about all the misery in their life to strangers who are just, like, trying to enjoy their drink. So it's kind of, how do you, as a player, how do you develop those muscles to, think out, well, obviously I wouldn't be sharing all of this backstory with these randos I've just kind of hooked up with for the sake of making some money. And as a DM, how can you facilitate getting some of that backstory out there without it being, forced or obvious or something that all the other players know about? And I think, if I might jump on this, obviously Matthew Mercer of Critical Role fame is an amazing DM, but what I love most is watching him refine his practice as he goes, because in this most recent season of Critical Role, he's had flashback sequences or dream sequences where he asks the rest of the players to leave the table, though I think you could even do it at the table if you wanted to. This is definitely more so for kind of one-offs with the DM, or it almost seems to be like for having an audience. But it'll have these dream sequences or these flashbacks where the character gets to share a little bit about themselves, but they're doing it all in their mind. So it's not just a group that will be able to separate that knowledge that they have as people from, and as players from their characters. You could do it at the table, but he set up some really great one-on-one moments where these characters get to reveal a little bit about who they are and what their motivations are and what secrets they're hiding. And he does that by setting up these moments. So what would normally be just a quiet night of camp to get your hit points and your spell slots back becomes something more flavorful because he'll pick out a moment to do like a dream sequence for a particular character. I thought that was a really great technique.
Yeah, when it comes to streaming, that's certainly really, really cool. And I can definitely see that. I love Jay. Who doesn't love Jay? He's done quite a bit of that in our game. Mm-hmm. But I find the biggest thing, in my opinion, and I can't be the only one in the world that's like, I love my character and the backstory and I want to tell everybody in the world. I can't. I can't do it.
You can't do it. It's so hard not to because you've spent so much time investing in writing this little novella for this person who you've been inhabiting for so long. Like my character's backstory finally got just the last arc of our campaign was mostly focused on my character and his backstory. And for the longest time, I wanted to spew, even though it wasn't even anything. I actually wrote a pretty mundane backstory, I think, but I still wanted to just spill the beans constantly. And so Jay is very good at fitting in little nips and things. Like we had an assassin, a disguised assassin trying to screw with us, which in some way related to Cupcake's PC's backstory, which we don't fully know yet.
Well, that's just it. A lot of this past season, he's brought in... We started the season with, we don't remember... Was it 3 months, 6 months of our lives?
I think it was 3 months of our lives that we were amnesiac. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was, and we had the 6 month window. We couldn't remember 3 months of it. And we were having dream sequences and little things that we would do that all of a sudden would trigger memories. And that's really cool. And so you get a little bit of backstory and things that way, but you really have to, and the biggest thing in my opinion, for whatever it's worth, you have to be true to that character. How would that character react and how would they let backstory things come out? Like, I'm pretty certain that a lot of this last part of the wing of our campaign was just Jay trying to push Loxley and Bert's buttons. I would put a quarter on it. Like, he just wants to see how it's all going to turn out.
I definitely do think that Jay, because he set our characters up as amnesiac for months on end when we first started, and we were thrown in medias res into this kind of political intrigue situation, and as what was really great is as the narrative progressed towards resolving it all, we got back. He revealed more and more memories to us, which helped contextualize other things that we had also remembered. So as we came up to the climax of this, with this kind of confrontation with I don't even want to say big bad because she was a very nice lady.
Yeah, okay.
We had kind of completely come around to fully understand it. So it was great it actually set up, because we had already revealed, some characters had already revealed backstories about themselves. Having a 3-month gap allowed our characters to be something we could explore and were like revelatory to ourselves. Because like, what the hell did we do for those 3 months? Jerica one-shotted a dragon, apparently.
Well, I can't say that super surprises me because she's kind of a badass.
It's true.
Spoiler alert, I dumped my backstory all over the...
And I'm looking forward to the next season, which portends telling us more about both Haley and Cupcake's PC's backstory.
I am terrified.
I am excited.
Let me reiterate. Ooh.
I was just put a bow on it. I think that, like, from the DM's perspective and what they can do is they can help to cultivate a bunch of players, understand which players really want to get their backstory as a fundamental motivator of everything they do every time that the group sits down, and which characters or players want to have a discussion and a dialogue with the DM about how that backstory may play into what the DM's arc or intended arc for the story or the season, or however you want to parse out the sessions of a game might be. That's kind of what I hear from y'all that Jay's doing so well is he's using that, which you can only really, it's a cat you can only let out of the bag once, I guess, backstory wise. Like you can lead breadcrumbs and reveal small details or small pieces of backstory. But for me, the compulsion is always to overshare that freaking thing. And just like Eric says, so almost to have the dialogue before you get started with a new group or a new adventure or a new arc with characters you already have, that can be an opportunity.
Or you could flip the trope on its head and be that character that always reveals some backstory, right? And it's not the real one. Is.
Oh, just be like a pathological...
Oh, here's a backstory that I just made up. Oh, here's another one. Oh, here's another one.
Jerika's describing, she's strumming my pain with her fingers. My first PC was a Don Quixote-esque cleric character, and as such would extemporaneously create like parts of his backstory, great deeds he had done, or would create elements or tenets of his faith just on the spot, things that contradicted things he said, but moments ago, and then have to kind of roll with those punches. I didn't get to RP him too much because I was also DMing, so I went pretty ham with him in the first few sessions and then kind of laid off the gas. But thank you for justifying my madness, dear Jerika. One of the themes that came up was we sent out the call to folks on Twitter to tell us what they think makes next level DMing, what specific element of DMs they like that they play with, or that they've watched on popular streams, really solidifies them as a great DM. And the thing that I see coming up a lot, here are a few sample comments from Tony Hader Elfson at H47, allowing players to follow through with whatever Wile E. Coyote scheme they want, but keeping it in the structure of the setting with appropriate consequences. This aligns with things like Supernaut at Supernaut26, who's also a member of the Shadow Council. I love seeing stuff that is largely based upon improv and creative storytelling with the players at the table. It's the sort of stuff that is only possible with D&D, and it's something that Chris Perkins does really well. And one more thing from our good friend Raftaval Santos at Heavenspawn on Twitter. Quick thinking. It's that ability to course correct a game seamlessly when the narrative starts to go off the rails, or to make quick adjustments when players want to try something totally wild, but they keep it within the mechanics in the narrative. And I think this all speaks to one of the traits that I think is core to being a DM, and it was the reason I wanted to run a Dungeon World game, being able to think on the fly within the scope and context of the story you're trying to tell. Because there were 1,001 things that happen in our Dungeon World games that I did not plan for, but seemed like a natural extension.
What?
Eventually, the last big combat encounter we had with this former avatar of this god in the game we were playing that Jerika was basically taking over for, and she wasn't having any of it. She wanted to keep the power to herself for eternity, ostensibly. She used an ability that allowed her to summon up an elemental effect, and it didn't really go her way. So it affected her as well, and it locked them both as these stone creatures to the ground, like fused to the ground, face to face, and they actually talked it out. I think this all points to being flexible and being able to work on the fly. It's the kind of thing that, it's a muscle you can flex with improv comedy. The way I was trying to flex it is I would think out situations I thought these characters might get into based on whatever stimuli I was putting before them and start RPing that out. I spent a lot of time in my car driving to and from work, talking in silly voices, pretending I knew how they were going to react to it, just to kind of flex those muscles so that when they, rolled not so great and I had to think up on the fly a consequence or something troublesome to happen or make things more difficult or to change the crux of the narrative, I was able to do it. And I was kind of a little pat on the back. I thought I was actually pretty quick. I was worried I'd be sitting there like, I think I was pretty adaptable. I think
definitely.
Okay. Someone just justify my love. Okay, thanks.
How often are you, when you're a DM and you're prepping for things like that? I mean, I would imagine that a lot of that stuff doesn't get used, right?
Well, like when I've prepped a D&D campaign, like the D&D one-shot we did. It was super detailed, very detailed. It essentially flowed the way I wanted it to flow, and the feedback I got is that it felt like your hands were tied. Like it was, each situation was fun and engaging. It was fun. There's, RP and combat and whatnot, but it didn't feel like there was any freedom to things. And I think I still kind of put the rails on this as well, because there was definitely a narrative endpoint to it. But I was talking to Haley about it after, and she's like, I didn't feel rushed. I didn't feel forced. I felt like I could whatever I wanted. And that's the feeling I want. I'm desperate to encapsulate in players, is to have an overarching narrative, but in the moment they think they can do whatever they want.
Open world feel is very important.
I hope I was able to cultivate that, and I think that's definitely what great DMs do. They have a narrative structure and they have ideas in mind. No matter what the players do, they're able to naturally still feed them into the overall narrative that they're hoping for, but you never see it coming. It still feels natural. It still feels like a consequence of your choices, even though, and it is a consequence of your choices, but the way you got there is informed by your choices, even if the goal was kind of always preset.
That's a good point.
Anyone else have any examples of, DMs they've played with, or something where they were impressed by how they were able to steer the game, herd the cats that are players?
Well, I love the point that my beautiful friend Christian at Shiny Batgirl on Twitter made.
She's the best.
She truly is. She's so talented.
She's a sweetheart. Yeah.
She thinks creating real consequences for actions is a great example of pro DMing. I swear nothing happens in Chris or Jerry's campaigns that doesn't carry some sort of consequence, positive or negative. And I like that everything you do affects the world. So, and it's very true. I mean, it's realistic expectations to exist in a world that you're creating that doesn't, it has that great balance of fantasy and realism.
I mean, when I think about D&D and what sets it apart from any other kind of fantasy playing a role sort of games, it really is that these characters, you can do whatever you want and it can have stakes that are world spanning, that it will change the context of things. Like you can play a game like Skyrim and you make a choice X or Y, but that choice is always X or Y. There's set numbers of paths, whereas when you have a human doing the computing, they can let it run in any different way, and it's so much more rewarding.
I want to go back to nimble DMing for a minute, because I think you're absolutely right that this is kind of the thing that we saw a lot with these answers. And my Saturday game, the DM has kind of made a rule for this, and I think I've talked about it before, but anytime in the session, any player has one chance to say canon, and then whatever was just said becomes canon.
Oh,
and
no.
So it's so funny. And so the two things are happening. First, you only get one.
Right.
So it only goes off the rails super bad, a finite number of times. And two, as a player, you really feel like you have affected something. Might not be super important. It shows that the DM is here to create the world with you. And I think that's really important.
Dreka, I have two very important questions for you. The first one stems from my word boyhood. It's like a blackball system, but for setting canon. Can we call it a cannonball system?
But it's not blackballing, it's whiteballing.
Okay, it's whiteballing, but for yeah, you're right. It is a vote for instead of a vote against.
Yeah.
Two, I am desperate to know at least one example of what you have made canon in this game.
Oh, yes.
So this sort of safe for work one was, we were on an island, and the island was controlled by pirates, and there were 3 pirate captains that were operating on this island, and they were all in the same faction. Over the course of the story, we were learning more and more about the pirate captains, and someone suggested that 2 of the pirate captains are in love and getting married, and that totally was canonized. These gentlemen had a really amazing honeymoon evening, and then got completely killed. Right there afterward.
Oh, no.
That happened.
I'd say that is an answered question.
Thank you all so much for joining us for this episode of Insight Check. We would love to express our gratitude for Vinswept for the beautiful intro and outro theme music called Never Stand Alone, and the beautiful, talented, gracious Amy T. Falcone for our social media branding, our chibis, our logo. Without you, we'd have to write our name in our underwear to know who we were.
It's true.
Thank you so much. And if you get a chance, we would be so very happy, and we might be able to eat tonight because we're sad.
We're
and
sleepy.
insert Sarah McLachlan music.
Yeah.
Please feel free to give us reviews and ratings on iTunes. It would make our days and our nights a little less cold.
I'm just seeing visions of puppies
Yes.
going by as Sarah
Yes.
talks to me about how for just $1 a day, answering your cues from our collective A's. This
Was
Insight.
Check, 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 check.
Woo! Air, you had me at butt moments.
I.
Play back the tape, it's there.
Speaking of butt moments,
Sorry, Jay.
on the spot, things that contradicted things he said, but moments ago.
But moments ago.